תודה רבה. אז כן, אני מושון, מה שהשתנה מאז שנה שעברה זה שאני עובד בחברה שנקראת Localize, שאתם מכירים אולי כמדלן בארץ, ואנחנו מנתחים מידע אורבני כדי לעזור לאנשים להבין טוב יותר את העבר, ההווה והעתידים של המקומות שבהם הם חיים. ועכשיו אני אעבור לאנגלית. I want to talk about empathy in DataViz, or rather the lack thereof. This is a very famous quote by Mother Teresa. If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. And we're thinking about this quote and we feel really warm inside. It's like you look at the one person and then you act. And if you look at many people, you don't act. And it teaches us that it's really important to connect on a personal level. But there's another quote from this guy. One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. That's pretty much the same quote with different intentions, right? And it really points at something that we've known for a long time, that there's a problem between our willingness to act on behalf of other people and the understanding through numbers. So I want to talk about three things. It always has to be three things. Dark visualizations, empathy, what is it good for? Say it again. And scaling compassion, and whether we can do it, and how. So my interest in this thing started in 2015 with Matthew Lucas's Hiroshima infographics, commemorating the 70th year to the bomb. It was published in National Geographic. And each one of these posters present different aspects of the data about the bomb. First one about events leading to the drop of the bomb. The second one is about the magnitude of death. And the third one, the bomb development sites until they converge specifically in Hiroshima. And I think, visually these are pretty impressive and stunning. But then the way I found out about them is through my friend Kate Crawford's tweet. So she was writing, DataViz people, what are your thoughts on super pretty visualizations on Hiroshima for today's anniversary? And DataViz people indeed responded. This is just a bit of that. But the gist in general was like, oh my God, like this should not be aestheticized. This is like exactly the opposite of what needs to happen with data like this, and so on and so on. At some point they found out that the guy who made it was a student, and then they kind of toned it down a bit and tried to be a bit more educational. Twitter, Now, a latecomer to this conversation was Alberto Cairo, and he had a surprising remark. And his remark was, I'm just very skeptical to the idea that data visualization is a medium that can convey or even care about conveying or increase empathy. And like, what? We're using visualization, we're using facts, and we're using numbers to think about policy and to change how people think. And empathy is such an important part of it. We're trying to push people towards doing the right thing. How can you do that without empathy? And that kind of pushed me towards starting to research this a bit. So, empathy, what is it good for? Well, if you ask Paul Bloom, he has a lot to say about it. He actually, he used to say that when he was telling people that he's writing a book about empathy, they were going like, oh. And then he was saying, yes, I'm against it. And then they're like, what? It's like you're saying you don't like puppies or things like that. The kind of thinking that you're joking with them. But he's pretty serious about it. He's actually saying empathy acts like a spotlight, focusing one's attention on a single individual in the here and now. Basically saying that if it's a spotlight, if you see one person better than you see others, it has two effects. You see one person better than others, and you see the others not as good as you see the one. And he argues that that becomes a problem when you talk about policy. He's arguing that empathy is biased towards those who look like us. For example, after 9/11, empathy served as the justification to the invasion of Iraq. In 2014, empathy with the 3 kidnapped and murdered Israeli boys served to legitimize the latest war in Gaza. Empathy and manipulation have always been used to prolong violence. And he's arguing that even if we don't empathize with distant strangers, their lives have the same value as the lives of those we love. And empathy is not the right way to act ethically in his argument. And when you think about it, there's a lot of people here. When we look at all of them, we don't act. When we look at the one, we do. And Paul Slovic argued that the day after the photograph appeared, donations went from $8,000 to $430,000 because of the photograph. And then they kind of, it stayed for a bit and kind of died out. We can see that in the coverage of Syria. So the yellow line is Aylan Khouri, the name of the kid, of the baby that was washed ashore. And then Syria and refugees, you see, there's a clear correlation between these 3 topics. Coverage, at least according to Google Trends. He goes on to say, we're compelled to help individuals, but the world's problems are too large to be served one person at a time. And he actually runs research to study the phenomena that he calls statistic numbing. Okay. So one of the experiments compared statistical life and identifiable lives. So in statistical lives, we can see different kind of data points about catastrophe. More than 3 million children affected in Malawi by shortage of food. 3 million Zambians face hunger. 4 million Angolans forced to flee their homes. More than 11 million people in Ethiopia need immediate food assistance. That's statistical lives, right? Now, identifiable lives. Rokia, a 7-year-old girl from Mali, Africa, is desperately poor and faces a threat of severe hunger or even starvation. Her life will be changed for the better as a result of your financial gift. So now let's see how do they pair. Statistical lives, more than $1 million. Identifiable lives, more than double, right? On one hand, you're given the option to help many people. You would do that less than half the times than helping one person. And the most horrifying aspect, it's enough to just mention statistical information that you would be less inclined to help. You know the same thing that you know about Rokia, but then it's enough for us to just mention the magnitude of the problem for you to be less interested in being involved. And that's a huge problem. Psychic numbing begins when the number of victims increase from 1 to 2. And that has been proven in research again and again and again. Paul Slovic argues that we don't know how to think. Our brains did not evolve to think in numbers and to think in scale. We're much better in identifying minor changes from total darkness. And we see them much better than changes in full light. Simon Baron-Cohen, the leading psychologist and researcher on empathy, he wrote quite a few books that have been leading in the research of empathy. The Science of Evil, on empathy and the origins of cruelty, 0 Degrees of Empathy. So this is Simon Baron-Cohen. This is not Sasha Baron-Cohen, his cousin, who's also very interested in empathy, but in very different ways. So forget about him. Simon Baron-Cohen talks about affective empathy. He differentiates between 2 types of empathy. So affective empathy, emotional connection, and being able to feel what they feel. And then cognitive empathy, rational understanding, the ability to take someone's perspective without necessarily feeling close to them or caring about them. So, so these are 2 different types of empathy, and we can compare, for example, the case of autism. Autism doesn't have a problem with affective empathy, it has a problem with cognitive empathy. And when we're talking about psychopaths, they have a problem with emotional connection, even though they do have cognitive empathy. They might even use cognitive empathy, understanding how somebody else feels, to take advantage of them. Okay, so he's arguing that there are 2 types and these 2 types kind of reminds of other 2 types. Daniel Kahneman, in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, that is obviously very, very relevant to anyone in this room, speaks of 2 systems. 2 systems of thinking. The first one is fast. It operates automatically and quickly, with little to no effect and sense of voluntary control. And system 2 allocates attention to the effortful mental activity that demands it, including complex computation and numbers, basically. The operation of system 2 are often associated with a subjective experience of agency, choice, and concentration. So, in a way, we can even possibly map them on the 2 types of empathy. Now, system 1 and system 2 are very relevant for visualization when we're talking about pre-attentive attributes of visualization. We take advantage of pre-attentive attributes to have system 1 quickly inform system 2 with a lot of data that would help it make the slower math-related calculations. So if we can think of so many types of pre-attentive attributes, these visually identifiable traits that communicate a lot of data to system 2, maybe we can think of empathy as a pre-attentive attribute. Maybe empathy can inform system 2 rather than close it. So let's try to think about scaling compassion. And in this case, I'm going to give you an example from a work by Periscopic. So you see the life arc, and then it falls at the age of 29 in this person could have lived to be 93. Same goes with all of the rest. So, and now they continue to an analytic comparison, right? Let's look at only the deaths that happened yesterday. And there are different ways of slicing and dicing this data set through this visualization that was grounded in an empathetic life arc of a single person, but then extrapolated. So we started with the one. We're looking at the one. Now, life, we think about life as an arc in a lot of cases. It could be my life arc, it could be my loved ones. Nothing is worse than your arc being cut. The empathetic framing has been established. Kim Reese, who was behind this visualization as part of her periscopic studio, says it's really about the stolen lives. It's about the potential, and it's about the things that were taken away. But they don't stop there. They use that as the framing for the most statistical analysis. Now, this statistical analysis could have been, we could have arrived directly to it in the beginning. In fact, this is a project by Slate working on the exact same data. So you see they have a map, and then they listed all of the victims. And we can see there are a lot of victims. You know, the scroll goes on for a long time. But statistical numbing, anyone? Right? There's another thing that happens in periscopic's work. The reality we want, the reality where people are not, their life arc is not cut by gun violence, is basically a missing data set. We don't have the data of how long would they have lived. And the way that they decided to frame it in a way that is very questionable, right? This is not scientifically, these are not facts. These are statistics of how long do people live in general and how long they could have lived. You know, some of them might have died from something else, but they've decided to present it as 414,973 years that was stolen. Stolen is a strong word. The idea of there's a wider issue here. Data analysis and data visualization leaves the reality we want misrepresented by design, because we only talk about the reality that we have, not the reality we're trying or we think that we should have had. But how can we change the reality that generated this? And this is a later critique from Steve Lambert. He responded to my article about this piece, and he argued that there's something that is very missing. When we move people, we must offer a productive outlet for that motivation. And that's something that Periscopic might have left out. So we're very, very moved by something. But if we don't use this opportunity to kind of direct people towards action, then we might not only be missing an opportunity, we might also be saying, this is the way things are, this is reality, and there's nothing you can do about it now. Of course, we are free to do whatever we want, and maybe some of us would see this and be motivated to do something about it. But as we know, many of us are not. So when we're talking about data in advocacy, we might want to complete the cycle by using it as an opportunity to funnel them into action. So to conclude, empathy is a spotlight, system one. It leaves some people in the light and most of them in the dark. Statistical numbing is how system 2 deals with this empathy challenge. Pre-attentive system 1 frames system 2. So maybe we can frame our thinking about issues that involve a lot of people using the empathy that we see with the 1. For our data hides the desired reality, and I think that's really important. So maybe we can think not only about the data that we have, but the data that we should have, that should be a part of our argumentation. And raising awareness is not enough, okay? Raising awareness, there's a class that I taught here at Shenkar about the internet and political activism. And at some point, my students understood that they are not allowed to say raising awareness anymore. Raising awareness for what? Raising awareness that leads to what? Otherwise, it's raising awareness to how things are fucked and you're not supposed to, like there's nothing to do about it. Show them that there is something to do about it. Thanks. We're also hiring, so talk to me. And the article is available on bit.ly/unempathetic. Questions? Yes.
So the part with the gun death that was invented, don't you think that's kind of opening the market? Isn't it a weak point?
The gun death was not invented. What was invented?
Lives that could have been lived. Right? Supporters of gun violence would say, well, you just made it up.
Yes, but supporters of gun, not violence, but opposer of gun control cannot argue that they would have died the next day anyway. And what Kim Reese is speaking about is that this visualization actually led to a lot of fruitful conversations across the aisle, which is also her argument against the call to action. And I think there's a lot of merit in that. Personally, I think you should raise awareness, you should lead to discourse, but there's more you should do. More? Okay.
We have time for one last question. Anybody? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.